Hello, everybody. It's good to see everyone on tonight on this evening. We got a treat for us. I know a lot of you are. If you're tuning in, you're probably a deer hunter or maybe just a wild game hunter, deer, turkey, whatever. And tonight we have Dr. Gregg Rentfrow from the University of Kentucky. He is our meat specialist there in Lexington, and he's going to talk a little bit about home meat processing, butchering your own deer. One of the things is that we saw during the pandemic was a lot of your regular processors that you probably went to, they had issues of getting you in, and there was a backup, and whether it be if you had a pig or something, or a steer that you were trying to get in, and then deer season came along, there was just a backlog. And so one of the things is people kind of had to learn on their own, and so we hope that you'll continue that by taking some of the tips that Dr. Rentfrow is going to share with us this evening. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gregg Rentfrow. Dr. Rentfrow, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. I love going down to your part of the country, down to Harlan County and down through the mountains and everything else. But it is kind of nice doing this in my office. As soon as I'm done, I'll be home in about 35 minutes or so. So it is nice from that standpoint. But yeah, just like Jeremy was saying, there has been a renewed interest in homesteading. And so what I thought about tonight was just kind of tackling it from home processing basics. So we'll cover a little bit of, if you're going to do your own cattle or your own pigs or even your own sheep, and that's going to kind of segue into, the deer and so on and so forth. Then we'll go into what kind of equipment do you need, and we can talk about this until we're blue in the face, but there's demonstration videos out there, and we have those. And so I've got some ways you can find those and links to get those as well. So like I said earlier, we get into this home-based processing, this homesteading, if you will, and there's always been an interest in doing this kind of stuff. But prior to COVID, this was always a little bit easier to go to the grocery store and do this kind of stuff. And then COVID-19 kind of hit. And then we started seeing supply interruptions, and not only meats, but one of these days when this is all said and done, I'd love for somebody to sit down and explain to me why we had a run on toilet paper and tissue paper and stuff like that. I don't understand that. And just like Jeremy was saying, is our local meat processors, we had a situation where they got maxed out because everybody got panicked. All right. We also had a backlog of animals that were ready to go to processing that didn't get there because COVID's highly contagious, and so it got into our meat plants as well. And so local processors got maxed out, and then we had this renewed interest in homesteading again, of doing everything yourself, growing your own fruits and vegetables, raising your own animals. In fact, one of my hobbies is I kind of do some MMA stuff, mixed martial arts with where I live in Richmond, and my daughter kind of got me into that. And some of the guys I do this with, a couple of them came up to me and said, we're not going to get caught like this again. We're raising our own animals. Can you teach us how to do this? I said, absolutely. And then all of a sudden we get a new renewed interest because, COVID numbers spike as we slowly try to make our way back to somewhat of a normal thing. And now we're having continued supply interruptions, and maybe not so much of food, or maybe a little bit of food, but now they're telling us get your holiday shopping in now because, what you want for Christmas may not be there. And I have to confess, the picture there, I was looking for pictures to add to this, and I came across this young lady here fishing. I'm not exactly sure what she's fishing for to have a sidearm that size on there. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. It doesn't look like she has heavy tackle for big fish, but she's definitely prepared for something big out there. I just thought that was kind of a cool picture there. But the other thing that we do is when this is ours, when we do it ourselves, it always tastes better. I can I can go to the grocery store and buy a tomato and it's okay. Or I can go to farmer's market and it's a little bit better at the farmer's market. But for some reason, even growing it in a 5-gallon bucket on my deck and my back door, it tastes better when I do it myself. And so a lot of people doing that as well. It's kind of, hey, I'm doing it. It's mine. Make it better. That kind of stuff. Before we get started into this kind of stuff, we need to talk about this. And I'm going to tell you what, folks, I understand there's limitations. I realize that you can't go out and spend, thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars, and in some case, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars on creating your own food processing plant. But regardless if you're doing it yourself or if you're, doing it professionally like we do at the university, you're still making food. So, and this is the one thing I tell hunters all the time is if I treated a deer carcass, or excuse me, a beef, pork, or lamb carcass the way some of you treated deer carcass, they'd shut me down and throw me in jail, and it's real easy to forget that you are, creating food when you're doing this yourself. So we need to keep that in mind of food safety. And people say, well, I don't ever remember anybody getting sick. Food safety and people getting sick and foodborne illnesses happen in wildlife all the time. It happens in home processed foods, whether it be your own doing beef, pork, and lamb yourself, or even home canned vegetables and things like that. People do get sick. So make sure you understand what you need to do to keep yourself and your family safe. Make sure you have clean areas and clean them often. Potable water. I could tell you a horror story about a family, and this was probably about 25 years ago or so, that did some processing and thought, well, there's the pond, we can clean in the pond, it's water. And they ended up getting sick and getting extremely sick from doing the washing things from a pond. Make sure you got potable water, especially if you're doing wildlife. Wildlife they're interesting creatures because we're dealing with a nomadic animal that, nomadic, I should say, nomadic animal that moves from area to state, and things like that. So you never know exactly what they've gotten into. And especially down in your area there in the mountains, the one thing I teach folks down in the mountains that I don't have to teach folks in the western part of the state is about bears. And bears is I believe one of the ag agents in your area down there in that southeastern corner of the bluegrass. Bears are just 300-400 pound raccoons. They're into everything, and so it's always a good idea to wear gloves when you're handling these. Usually we talk about latex gloves or plastic gloves, or even the dish cleaning gloves. Wear those, something to protect your hands. One of the things that we haven't really talked about in your area of the state, but if we get into the western part of the state, I don't know if folks have heard in southeastern part of the state, but there was a deer that came up positive for chronic wasting disease, CWD. It was not in Kentucky, but it was about 7 to 10 miles from the border over in the far western part of the state. And according to Fish and Wildlife protocols, they consider that a positive for the state, even though it wasn't in the state, because again, these animals tend to roam around. And so was this animal in Kentucky at one time? It's fairly easy to assume that, as well as you could assume they never made it to Kentucky. But there was a positive for chronic wasting disease in that part of the state, the far western side of the state, forcing Fish and Wildlife to execute their protocols of trying to eliminate that from the herd. And so with that in mind, it's always a good idea to protect your hands when you're dealing with processing wildlife, or even if you're doing your own cattle, pigs or sheep as well. Then we get into the question of location. Where do we do this? All right. Well, I've got a barn. It's an old dusty barn. Can I do it in there? The key word is, dusty barn, If you're going to do a barn, let's try to clean it up, get that area cleaned up to where it looks like we could feasibly process animals in there. Or an old greasy machine shed, may not be, the machine shed may not be as common as where I'm from in Illinois, where we put our, combines and tractors and stuff like that. And that may seem like a good place. Well, it's out of the weather, just like that old dusty barn, but it's an old greasy machine shed. So you need to make sure you got those areas cleaned up. Or a cluttered garage. That's another one that I see a lot, as well as people have that cluttered garage. Again, make sure you're doing this in an area that is clean. And you'll see some pictures, and I'll show you some stuff that you shouldn't do, even though we've probably all done it before as well. Equipment. Again, the old piece of plywood that you found, and I sprayed it off, put it on 2 sawhorses. That makes for a good cutting board, right? Not really. All right. What you see in the picture are those plastic cutting boards. That's a pretty good idea. If you're going to use an old folding table, all right, make sure you put something over it that you're cleaning these areas, and make sure that you're cutting on these guys, so that it is a clean area that is not going to make your family sick. Here's another one, old card table. I mean, and the reason why I throw these up there, folks, is because people have asked me this before. Can I use an old card table? Well, we've got an old card table at our house, and it's got that kind of cushy top on there. That's probably not a good idea. Not that those things can't be converted. For example, if all you have is an old piece of plywood that you're going to put between a couple of sawhorses, let's thoroughly clean that plywood. Wouldn't hurt to clean it with some bleach water as well, and then maybe put something clean over top of it, some plastic or something along those lines. Same with the folding table. Maybe the card table is all you have. Do what you can to try to make things clean and safe for you and your family as well. An old folding knife. I don't really recommend folding knives. I understand sometimes that's all you have. And the reason why I don't is when you close that hinge there can get material in there that is going to harbor bacteria. An old hatchet or an axe. I've heard people wanting to use this as well. Again, not the most perfect thing. We'll talk about some equipment towards the end that you could use. But those old hatchets and hatchets, those things, they're used for other things. In meat cutting, everything I have is dedicated towards cutting meat. I'm not going to take it to go cut up a tree limb or something like that. It's dedicated for that. And so axe and hatchets aren't always that way. And I threw this in. I was visiting with Jeremy before you guys logged on. And I've done probably 5 or 6 deer cutting demos in the last 2.5 weeks throughout the state. And I was in Friday night, I did one, and this guy came up to me and he said, well, I don't know why you're using that handsaw. We always use a chainsaw. And I'm like, oh, please, for the love of all that's holy in this world, stop using a chainsaw. Yes, it does work wonderful. All right, I'm sure it does. It's pretty quick. But again, just like that axe or that hatchet, that chainsaw is designed to cut wood, and it's used to cut wood, and you buy it so you can cut wood, and it's designed to cut through wood quickly. And so that bar grease that you use, that bar oil to keep that chain lubed and running good on that chainsaw, that's going to get on your meat. All right. And well, I'll wash it off. No, you can't do that kind of stuff. If you're going to do this, you need to have a set of equipment that is dedicated towards doing this, and it does nothing else but cut meat. I don't care if it's for your deer or your cattle or whatever you're doing. It needs to be dedicated to that, because we want to make sure we keep our family safe and keep ourselves safe. All right. And it happens all the time, that kind of stuff there. Here's the other thing. All right. Bacteria love this danger zone, as we call it, this between 40 and 140 degrees. I'm not for sure what the weather's been like down there in the southeastern part of the state. Last 2 mornings, it's been pretty cool. Where I'm at, I live in northern Madison County, obviously work in Lexington. It's been cool every morning, but about an hour and a half ago, I decided I needed a cup of coffee, and I left my office here on campus and went down to the library to where there's a Starbucks, get a cup of coffee, and it's fairly warm, and so even though it's cool overnight, it warms up through the day. If you're doing this, make sure you don't have the mechanical refrigeration like I have down in my meat slab. Make sure you're doing this when it's going to be cool outside. Okay. I realize deer season doesn't always correspond with when it's cold outside, but we'll talk about what we can do towards the end of this when we start focusing in on deer to make sure we're in that danger, we're outside of that danger zone, and we don't keep products in that danger zone very often. I hope this works as far as a pointer goes. Let me get this here. Let's see. I think I can use pointer. Yes, there we go. Did I miss it? Sorry, there we go. So I realize most of the time when we start hunting, we're in this area right in here. If you're going to use Mother Nature as a refrigerant, you need to be back over here. And I'm not saying it's over here at nighttime, but it still gets over here in the daytime. Let's get it closer to the daytime temperatures being here. So when we get down here at night, we're okay. Cold works well. Cold works well. As you can see down here, these things can double in 20 minutes. So the warmer we get, the more we're going to have situations. So keep that cold air in mind as we go through this. Here's some equipment that you really need. Okay. You're going to need knives. Now, these are fairly easy to get. I'll give you some websites where you can get actual meat cutting knives. This is the brand of knife that I use, these Forstner Victorinox knives. I've got a set that's dedicated solely for the kill floor, and I got a set that's dedicated solely for cutting meat in the meat slab. And these are fairly easy to get. You see they're not folded blades. These are actual knives. The challenge you may have with these knives is they tend to be made from a little bit harder steel. So if you're not an expert at getting an edge on there and keeping them sharp, they can be a little bit of work at doing that, but the edges stay true longer on that kind of stuff. You're going to need a steel. That's what this guy is right here. It's designed to hone the blade to, if you look at the blade of a knife under a microscope, it's not a smooth edge. It's actually got these teeth. And when you're cutting, you hit a bone. I'm trying to get this lined up in the camera here. Those teeth kind of fold over. And what that steel does is straightens them back up. Eventually, you're going to start losing those teeth, and it's going to have to go to the stone and get sharpened. Okay. Saws. Here's a classic example of a meat hand saw. I think I've got 6 of them down in the meat lab that we use for teaching and so on and so forth. These, if you get one of these, keep it, dedicate it to this. Here's questions I've had in the last 2 weeks. Can I use a wood saw? Yes, but don't. And they say, well, what do you mean? That wood saw is, again, designed to cut wood. Will it cut through bone? Probably so, but chances are you've used it to cut wood. All right. Can I use a hacksaw? Probably so, but it don't, because hacksaws are designed to cut metal, and they've been cutting metal. You don't want those little metal shards in your product. If you buy one of these, keep it dedicated for that. Okay. The saws we have downstairs, when we use hand saws, they stay in the meat slab, and they're dedicated solely for use in the meat slab and use in cutting meat. That's what those saws are designed for. You're going to need some sort of lug. We call them lugs. They're the big tubs that we put meat in. We call them lugs down in the meat slab. You're going to need something to put your trim in. It's always a good idea to have sanitation wipes or bleach wipes so that you can wipe everything down. Bleach is a wonderful sanitizer. Those bleach wipes make it even easier to do that. You just pull one out, like a wet nap, and just cut cover everything, clean everything with that. So you're trying to keep your family safe and yourself safe as well. Here's the things I hear from folks. Everybody's got an excuse for why we're not doing this. I don't want to spend money on that kind of stuff. I only do this 2 or 3 times a year. Okay. I get that. Everybody lives off a budget, but if you're going to do this, you do need to dedicate purchase the stuff and dedicate it for this. I'm not selling this. So why do I have to go all these extremes? Again, you're trying to keep your family safe, keep yourself safe. The last thing you want to do is maybe a neighbor comes over for dinner and you serve them some of this stuff and they get sick. And I get this, well, you're just paranoid. Granted, being trained in this kind of stuff and having several food microbiology classes, it does make you a little bit paranoid, but there's nothing wrong with being a little paranoid on this kind of stuff because we want to make sure our families are safe. Here's my favorite. I've had this happen. Even professional meat processors say this. Done this for years and nobody's gotten sick. So why should I change now? Just because you haven't got sick doesn't mean you haven't done something wrong. All right. This logic is the same in my mind, is the same as saying I don't have high cholesterol because I haven't had a heart attack. You just could be asking for, problems. So make sure we keep this food safety in mind. Please, 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 please. So let's do this. All right. Humor me a little bit. We'll talk about livestock because I know some of you are thinking about doing this as well. And all these things that we're talking about, these skills can be transferred to your deer or your elk or your bear or your moose or your rabbit or squirrel, whatever you're going to do there. By law in the meat industry, we have to practice what's called humane slaughter, meaning these animals have to be rendered insensible to pain prior to exsanguination. That's the government's way of saying stunned before bled. Even the stunning process has to be safe and painless for those animals. And so here's something we do. All right. You can use a gunshot. Now, not everybody has what I use and we use down in Meat Lab, which is a Kathy bolt gun. It's a gun that just shoots out a bolt about 3.5 inches or so, and then the bolt goes back into the gun. So I know you guys don't have those. I'd be shocked if somebody said, yeah, I got 2 or 3 of them. For the most part, we're going to use a gunshot. If you're using a 22, make sure you're using a 22 long or a 22 Hornet, something that's got a little bit of power to it. Can I use a 44 Magnum? Yes, but that's overkill. Deer slug, yes, but that's going to be a little bit overkill on some of this stuff. All right. You can see in this this cartoonist drawing here shows you where the brain is for these animals. As you can see, and I'll show you something a little bit more close up in real life, is the old adage of right between the eyes doesn't always work. All right, especially on livestock, their brains tend to be in a different location. Bleeding, you can do the slit the throat thing where you're going to start underneath the jawline and go straight across. That works really well for cattle and sheep. Doesn't always work well for pigs because they have so much flesh through there. So really on cattle and hogs, we go in behind the sternum. So they're hanging upside down and we'll go in behind the sternum and sever the major veins and arteries coming out of the heart. So you're really only, making a slit in there, a little bit bigger than the width of the blade you're using. The thing you got to keep in mind when doing these animals like this, you're going to stun them, you're going to bleed them out. Those nerves stay active for about 10 minutes or so after we've started this, as we politely say, the conversion of muscle to meat. So it's very possible, and it is very common to see them moving. Okay. And I say moving, legs moving, as I was visiting with some folks, before we started this in class today, we process pigs. And one of the things we talked about with the class is pigs, they'll do this thing we call an agonal gasp, where you see their mouths kind of just rhythmically moving, open and close, open and close, open and close. It's a nerve reaction. Doesn't mean they're trying gasping for air or anything like that. Really, in reality, they're not inhaling or exhaling. It's just their mouths are moving back and forth. That's normal. All right. If you touch their eyes for reflexes, so if I take my glasses off here and poke myself in the eye, you're going to reflex by closing your eyes and blinking. All right. To make sure you got a good stun. If you touch their eyes and they don't blink, you've got a good stun. Another thing USDA looks for is if the eyes are following movement. All right. So you may seem like you have a good stun, but then it just seems like their eyes are always moving, or the animal is going what we call riding reflex. He's trying to get up All right, USDA has issues with that. So we want to make sure we do things humanely when we process these animals. So if you're doing your own livestock, make sure you're doing things humane as you can. And you say, you know, USDA will shut you down if you don't. But in reality, you know, this is why you want to do it, is because, you know, you have better meat quality if you can do things as humanely as possible. So just something to keep in mind there. This is something we did down in the lab, and I do this and I throw this in there as an illustration to show you where that brain is on those animals. And in wildlife, it kind of translates the same way. These are bolt gun marks. So the bolt is about the size of your little finger, and it goes in there and it's designed to cut that hole in the bone. And what it does is, not only is the bolt going in there, but that little cut piece of bone becomes a projectile to travel through the brain as well. Keep in mind, you know, you see these two holes. We always do a double stun because we're dealing with animals that are so big. This came off of about a 1,500 to 1,600 pound animal. So that tells you how big these animals are. Keep note where these eyes are. Okay. So what we'll do is, for illustration purposes, we'll go in with a saw and we'll cut the forehead plate off. And that allows us to see where those bolt marks are in relationship to the brain. So this was a good stun. You can see it went into the brain cavity pretty soundly and easily. Signs of a good stun. The other thing to note is, the big animal, you can tell by the person's hand, that brain's not very big on that 1,600 pound animal. It's only about the size of your fist. Maybe a size a little bit bigger than a baseball, but nowhere near a softball size. So they're not very big brains in these animals. And again, notice the eyes. Okay, shooting between the eyes, there's nothing but sinus cavity there, so you're not going to do any good. So you got to get your marks up there a little bit higher as well. All right, here's the evisceration process. So skinning, if you're doing these at home, you know, you're talking about a big animal like cattle or even pigs, a front end loader of a tractor, make sure we clean that end loader off, that bucket off there before we do this. Also using a come along, you know, a shed or a barn, you know, you can use those as well, as long as it'll pick that animal up and it's clean. You may have to find some trolleys or hooks to put in those hind legs to help you get those guys up in the air. The outside, when you're skinning, the outside should not come in contact with the underneath of the hide there, just to prevent contamination. All right, we want to eliminate all that filth as we can. Here's some pictures I took today of Brock, our meat lab manager, showing kids how to open up the midline. All right, you can see the goal here is to keep the internal organs intact. This is something that always bugs me about deer hunters, and I've seen deer hunters do this a lot, is they get their knife in a horror. I'm going to grab a pen here off my desk. Let's see, you can see that. They use what I call this horror movie grip, all right? And they go up to the carcass and they just stab and rip down. And when you do that, when you open up that midline, you cut all that internal organ, all right? And they've got digesta in there, which is full of bacteria that gets on the carcass. And you may not think it's that big of a deal. I'll just wash it off. When you do that, you just exacerbate the problem, because now you're washing it, you've aerosoled all that bacteria that's on there, and it's going to get all over everything, even if it didn't come in contact with the digesta, by washing it off. And so in the meats industry, we have to cut that off. So we can't spray it off. We have to cut it off. And so the more you can eliminate that, the better off you are. So we want to keep all the nasty stuff from getting on the carcass. Now, how do you open up the midline? There's the method that most of us have been taught, is the old, what I call the V finger, where you got your fingers in there and you're just kind of teasing that cut along, and you're using your fingers as a way of keeping the internal organs away from that midline cut. This is what we call the butcher cut method here. And you can see where Brock is. He's got the carcass hanging up. So the head's actually was down here, okay? And he's hanging up by his hind legs. And you can see where Brock's knife is. He just makes an opening here where he's pretty confident there's nothing there. He takes his time to where he can get his hand and arm inside the body cavity. And you see his knife right there. And so what he's doing is he's grabbing the knife like this. All right. So that his finger and his thumb, as he's moving down, pushes those organs out of the way. And that's what you kind of see him doing right here, is once he starts cutting, he doesn't stop. All right. That's the problem with people. They'll stop. And when they do that, these internal organs come up over the top of him. So you can see where he's already opened up the sternum, and he's just opened this up here at the crotch of the animal, and he's moving down. All right. And it's just one cut. He's, the hilt of the knife is inside the animal. He sees hands inside there as well. And he goes all the way down to where he's met the two lines have met each other. And you could see even on this pig from this morning, his hand, it just comes over top of him. And the reason why you don't want to stop, because then all of a sudden you're trying to push all this stuff out of the way, and it can be a challenge. So that's, to me, the most effective way of trying to make sure you don't cut the internal organs on these animals as well. So let's talk about this. What you guys are, here to learn is deer. All right. And I know in your part of the country, you probably have some elk down there as well. And when I go up to Maine, we're not only talking about deer and elk, we're also talking about moose. All right. Never seen one in the wild in real life. I'm looking forward to the day I do. I hear there's something else to see in real life. But let's talk about doing this for deer. Okay. All the methods that we talked about are transferable to deer. All right. We are going to take the hide off. Now, here's a situation you get into. All right. You want to do this yourself, but all of a sudden you get a deer that looks like this, and you're thinking to yourself, he's pretty big, or maybe he still has the velvet on there, which I'm come to find out that preserving that velvet on a mount is quite something else. And most people around here can't do that. They have to send it off to somebody who has the equipment to do this. If you do this, you need to make sure you consult the taxidermist on how they want you to do this. You can see on this mount, we're almost back here at just right before that front leg, or maybe a little bit behind the shoulder. So he may actually want you to take hide from back here. It's easier to cut it off than it is to add it. Okay. So if for some reason you come across a deer and you want to have a trophy mount, before you do anything with the hide, make sure you consult the taxidermist that you're going to use to see how he wants you to take that off. If you're doing this solely for meat and you want to do like the gutless field dress, again, make sure we're keeping things clean and safe. Here's the one thing that I always get upset about with folks, and I've had several hunters tell me this. They'll do a field dress, they'll leave the hide on because it's easier to get it back to the home and take the hide off at home, but they're going to remove the internal organs, and they take the internal organs out and they decide, well, I'm just going to fill it full of leaves and sticks, to kind of soak all that stuff up. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Grass is another one I heard. That's all contamination, folks. Don't do that. And you say, well, I'd never done that before. And the reason why I'm telling you that, because people told me that's what they do. But here's the situation you get into taking the hide off once you get it back home. If you're going to do if you're not doing the gutless field dress, that hair is hollow. So the hair on these guys is hollow. That's by design, keeps them, kind of warm in the wintertime. If you've ever got deer hair on a carcass and you think, I'm going to wash it off, I don't think you could glue it on there any tighter. All right. So that hollow hair sticks to that carcass. It's a good idea to maybe burn that off. Most of you have a blowtorch at home. Now you're just singeing the hair to get it off. You're not cooking the carcass. Okay. But it's something that Fish and Wildlife started doing as well. When they bring me an animal to cut up for either we're doing a how-to video or we're doing a demonstration for the field the fork thing, they try to keep it as clean as they can, but accidents happen, and they'll get a torch and burn that excess hair off and then clean it off there as well. It's a good way of preventing contamination by getting that hair off. Again, visceral remover, like we talked about earlier, using those same techniques we use in the livestock and meats industry, you can use those on these guys as well. The difference is now we've got gunshot contamination that we have to get rid of. And so if you're using a gunshot, boom, we got ribs, we got a lot of trauma to that area. That's all got to be cut away. One thing that happened to me Friday that I honestly can say that I have never, of all the deer I've cut up in my lifetime, this was a deer taken by a hunter, and the deer snuck up from him behind, and it got underneath his tree stand and wouldn't move. It just stood there, and he didn't want to spook it, because you spook it, all of a sudden we have a stationary target to a moving target. And so he had to shoot it from above, and the angle was such a way that he actually shot it through the backstrap or the loin. And when I cut those loins out, those back straps, there was hair inside the middle of that muscle from where that arrow had gone through. That has to be cut out as well. So make sure you're removing all that trauma out there, the blood clots and the bruising and everything else, just so you can make sure we keep things safe and sanitary as well. Here's something that I don't think people in your neck of the woods does this, but this was a common thing where I grew up in Illinois. If you shot a deer in Illinois, it was, I think, local law that you had to load it up in the back of your truck, and you had to visit every gas station in town to make sure everybody saw that you got a deer. Okay. And then those that didn't get the chance to see the deer in the back of your truck, you better hang it from the tree in your front yard so that those that missed it can see that. All right. That happens a lot. Okay. Don't do that. I understand maybe if it's cold outside, you can do that kind of stuff. But if it's in those warm temperatures, it's, don't do that. The other thing, thankfully, I think we've stressed to people, don't strap it to the hood of your vehicle either. Number one, it's hard to see out the windshield. Number two, there's a lot of heat coming off that engine. If the bed of your truck gets hot because of exhaust and transmission, you don't want to do that either. You want to get that thing back to home and get it cooled off as quickly as possible. You can, in warmer days, stop off at the gas station. Whoever wants to see it can see it there. Buy bags of ice, put in that body cavity, get that heat out of there quickly as possible. Okay. And here's the thing that you got to keep in mind, folks. That carcass needs to go in rigor. It has to get stiff. All right. That's going to happen. You need to let it do that. I've had somebody tell me, well, as soon as we shoot it, we cut it up in retail cuts and we put it in the freezer. Okay. Don't do that, because that muscle is going to go into rigor and you're making it thing even tougher than it should be. All right. Let that carcass go into rigor. If you have to, leave the hide on, fill the body cavity full of bags of ice, and put it in a place where it's not, don't put it in the front yard, okay, on a tree, and let all the neighborhood dogs and squirrels and everything else check it out. But make sure that you actually put that, get it to where it's safe away from wildlife and other dogs and cats and this, that, and the other. Keep that body cavity full of ice. Usually takes these guys around, anywhere from 6 to 12 hours to go in rigor, and then you can skin it. It needs to go into rigor first. All right. Go through the skinning process. If you have any contamination, cut that off. Any of it that you think you've missed, if you do this, get some vinegar, acetic acid, that's what vinegar is, about a 10% solution, put it in a sprayer and spray it on the carcass. Here's the caveat to this, because I've heard this done before. Go get a brand new sprayer, clean it, and use only that to spray your carcass down with this acetic acid or vinegar water mixture. Do not use the sprayer that you use to spray Roundup through or insecticide or something like that. You say that seems like common sense. I wouldn't do that. I've actually had people call me up and ask me that. Okay. Go buy one and dedicate it to this kind of stuff. Make sure it stays cold. Everything stays cold. If it's not getting below that 40 degrees during the daytime temperatures, then let's get that carcass in the rigger and keep those ice bags in there to keep that carcass cooled down. And then we need to fabricate that guy within the next 24 hours. Okay. So that, we can get that guy back into the cold as much as we can. All right. Fabrication. There's not a whole lot I can tell you other than I'm going to give you some video links that you can watch, learn how to do this. You can always feel free to call me if you have any questions on this kind of stuff. Beef carcasses are big. Okay. For us, a side of beef weighs anywhere from, 350 to 500 pounds. Chances are you're not going to be doing animals that big, but there's videos out there to show you how they do that kind of stuff. Here's, if you're looking for those anatomical areas where we traditionally cut those, this is a good illustration of how we do that. Again, get you some videos. I'll show you those at the end as well, so you can see that kind of stuff. Pork's the same way. It has anatomical locations that we're going to cut this guy up. These are always good to get from, your Kentucky pork producers. You can get a same chart with beef from Kentucky Cattlemen's Association as well. So you can get these charts. They're pretty easy to get. Here's deer. All right. This is a deer. And I like this one. I found this one on the internet yesterday when I was putting all this stuff together. It has best meat and good meat. All right. It is what it is. Here's deer processing. There's no right or wrong way to do this. All right. You're doing it for yourself. I had a student. All right. Love this young man like he's my own son. All right. He's a big time hunter. Had him in class. He TA'd for me last year. Young man that you can't miss because now he plays for the New Orleans Saints. All right. Big deer hunter. And Landon came up to me and says, Doc, we always throw those shoulders away. They ain't worth messing with. All right. So, okay, Landon, let's do this. Let me show you what we do in beef where we get a flat iron steak. Let me show you how to do that. These videos, especially watch mine, I show you how to get that deer flat iron, as I call it, out of there. That shoulder works really well for ground product as well. Okay. Now, here's something to kind of keep in mind here, this deer fat. And the reason why I have a question mark on there, I have worked with deer hunters that say deer fat is the god-awfulest tasting thing in the world. I've worked with other hunters that love deer fat. All right. Again, this is going to go back to what that animal was eating. In your part of the country, you probably don't have a whole lot of row crops, so they're mainly forage-based animals. Get into the western part of the state, or especially where I'm from in Illinois, deer, they get out in the row crops and they eat, corn and soybeans and everything else. So they're going to taste differently than what you're going to experience there. If you don't like the deer fat, cut it away. All right. If you do, that's what it is. Liver. Okay. Again, I'm not a fan of consuming organ meats from wild animals because I don't know what they've gotten into. But if you're one of those that does that, make sure you're choosing a healthy liver that is clean. It doesn't have any pustules on there and that indicate that there are abscesses, or maybe there's liver flukes in there as well. We have YouTube videos. Stay calm, I got you, on this kind of stuff. I threw this picture in here today and I thought, okay, here's the situation. All right, let's look at what's going on here from a food safety standpoint. All right, we've got a little bit of a rusty chain, which is not the best thing to work with, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. We got a tarp down here, which is good. All right, that's good. Looks like we got a guy in a white coat back here in the corner. Not sure why he's not in the picture, but I don't know. We are in a sheltered area, which is good. It looks like they tried to clean it up a little bit. That's good as well. Not sure if we should be doing this next to the lawnmower. Okay, maybe throw a tarp over there. But look at these guys. All right. We've got dirty clothes processing food. This guy's got a white coat on. He's okay, as long as the white coat's clean. All right. But you can see that we're not wearing gloves or anything else. I spent years cutting meat just like this, barehanded. The last 15 years of my career, and I've been doing this for 34 years, I will not touch a piece of meat without gloves on. And the reason being is I'm trying to protect my consumers from anything that's on my hands, even if I wash my hands. All right. And I will, if I'm spending a lot of time down in the lab cutting, I will change my latex gloves often because they can be like your own hands and get dirty. It's a good thing to keep in mind. All right. You're saying, well, you're hammering on this food safety thing. I am, because I'm trying to keep you guys safe. Okay. Something I want you to do, you know, it's the old Saturday Night Live thing, you know, listen to me now, hear me later type stuff. Regardless if you're doing homesteading for like your own beef, pork, or lamb, or even you're doing deer or elk, you're going to get a lot of ground product out of it. You can make it into hamburger. You can also do sausage as well. And if you do that, you're going to need one of these grinders here. This technology is fairly easy to get now. You can get those online, or if you want to make a trip to in your area, you know, Bristol, Tennessee is probably the closest. There's a Bass Pro Shops down there. If you're really wanting to travel, we got a Cabela's here in Lexington to get this kind of stuff, or you could even just go online or Walmart. And if you want to make sausage, you get these pre-blended mixtures that work really well. If you're going to do the fermented, like the summer sausages, you know, they've got those kits as well that you can utilize. So let's talk about ground deer. All right. Deer is notoriously fairly lean. All right. Doesn't have a whole lot of fat, but if you're one of those that likes to get into this situation where I don't want to eat deer fat, you cut it away, but fat's flavor, folks. And so if we get into this kind of stuff, if you're grinding it, the same principles apply. You may want to add some fat. Sometimes that's in the form of a pork Boston butts, the shoulder of the pig that we make pulled pork out of. If you get a hold of some beef suet, that works out really well. Some folks do a 1-to-1 ratio. That's up to you. That's solely your taste. Okay. Let's say you get a kit and you want to do your deer summer sausage. Please follow the recipe to a T. All right. Because there's ingredients in there that you have to use. One of those is if it says this kit will make 25 pounds of product, actually weigh your trim that you're actually making it with 25 pounds of ground product. Why? Don't look at it and say that looks like 25 pounds, because there's ingredients in there. One of those is called nitrite or pink salt or preg powder or Instacure. It goes by different names. That works wonders. It's beautiful product. All right. We use it to control the growth of Clostridium botulinum, which causes botulism. All right, which is a good thing. It also gives us that cured meat color and flavor that we like so well. But a little bit of nitrite, perfect, works wonders. A lot of nitrite becomes deadly. All right, so make sure we're using that. If it says use a teaspoon per X number of pounds, don't guess on the teaspoon. Actually get a teaspoon and measure that stuff out. Then you're going to say, okay, that summer sausage is good. Let's kick it up a notch. Let's use a jalapeno and cheddar. All right, let's make sure we're using dried jalapenos to make these jalapeno and cheddar summer sausages. Or here's a red pepper summer sausage down here with the cheese in there. Make sure you use dried. Don't use pickled. Don't use fresh. Why? Because those guys are so acidic. Your meat's not going to stick together. Denatures those proteins. They won't stick together. So you want them to stick together. So use a dried jalapeno. You're also going to want to use a high temperature cheese. Notice how you can actually see the bits of cheese in here. That's a high temperature cheese. It can survive the cooking process. It doesn't melt. It stays put. You want that for two reasons. Number one, store-bought cheese. It's wonderful. Don't get me wrong, but it will melt. And when it resolidifies, it gets a sour flavor. Number two, it will melt and you probably won't see it. But we're visual people. If I want jalapeno and cheddar summer sausage, I want to see the jalapenos and I want to see the cheddar. Are you going to be able to find this at your local grocery store? Probably not. You're going to have to go online to get this stuff. High temperature cheese. That's what you're seeing in these pictures here. Okay, it looks like we got a pepper jack here and a cheddar down here. There's all kinds of, this could be Swiss. I don't know. There's different kinds high temperature cheeses. They're fairly easy to make. Generality, keep it clean. All right, please. Wet is not clean. Just because it's wet doesn't mean it's clean. All right. Keep things cold, even your grinder parts. If you're doing this at home, doesn't hurt to throw your grinder in the freezer or refrigerator. Some of them now even come with these little insulator caps that fit on the throat to keep everything cold. Please do that. Vacuum bag. All right. That technology's come down in price. You don't need to spend the $25,000 to buy a great big huge industrial vacuum packager like I've got down at Meat Lab. You can spend a couple $100 at Walmart or someplace like that to buy the home vacuum packaging machines. That works well. What you can do is, we age beef carcasses to make them more tender. You can do kind of the same thing with deer, except for you can't just let them hang like the picture behind me. You're going to have, because they'll dry out too quick. So what you can do is after you cut them, the next day, cut them up, put them in a vacuum bag, put them in your refrigerator for about 5 or 7 days. They'll age inside that vacuum bag. Let those enzymes get in there and attack those connective tissues and proteins and make those guys a little bit more tender there. Then you can throw it in your freezer. Okay. Vacuum bag prevents freezer burn. Okay. So you don't have to worry about that. Also keep in mind, like we've alluded to earlier, animals are going to taste a lot like what they've been eating. Prime example, grain finished beef versus grass finished beef. It has a different flavor. I often tell the story about one of my mentors at the University of Illinois, big time hunter. He was hunting moose in Montana. That's where he grew up, in Montana. He shot this moose. It was waist deep snow. So it must have been around 4th of July or something. All right. It's kind of hard when you tell a joke on Zoom if anybody gets it. But shot that deer, or excuse me, shot that moose, waist deep snow, took it home, cut it up, cooked it, took one bite, threw everything away. If you think about in waist deep snow in Montana, what did that moose have to eat? Pine needles. And guess what he tastes like? Pine. All right. So just keep that in mind. They're going to taste a lot like what they've been eating. All right. If you're looking for something different, something new, recipe wise, I'm going to tout what we've been doing here. Those of us in the college have been working together along with folks in Fish and Wildlife, and we've come up with these Cook Wild recipe cards. I think we're getting ready to release the 3rd or 4th set of these. They're going to be hitting your local extension offices. They've been extremely popular. I've been pushing we need to make a cookbook. But these Cook Wild recipes are really fun to do. We ask for recipes from other folks that have this kind of stuff. We adapt recipes for, maybe beef, pork, or lamb into this kind of stuff. And we're using different species. The last one we did about 2 or 3 months ago, where we were working with beaver and raccoon, making recipes for them. They put me in charge of the raccoon one, and I wasn't real fond of that. Willing to try anything, but the old trash panda was not something I was really fond of. Maybe we need to come up with a different recipe for that guy. Videos. All right. We can talk about this, but you're going to have to see it done in real life. If you go to YouTube, if you just simply type in beef fabrication, that gets you the one of my videos. Type in pork fabrication, gets one of my videos on pork fabrication, lamb fabrication. That pulls up as well. So we got 3 for beef, pork, and lamb. We also have a few for deer as well. This is the website where you can find all the videos that we have done as far as fabrication. They're actually on our Meat Science webpage. This is the URL to get there. I'll leave that up for a little bit. Plus, I believe Jeremy is recording this. So if for some reason you don't get this down, he's got this recorded as well. This takes you to that video page where you'll see not only the beef, pork, and lamb, you'll see stuff for country ham, the couple of deer one we got. I think we even did a fish one as well. And those on there, explain different ways of cutting up that deer carcass that you may not have thought about there. But if you just go to, that website and it pulls all those up. You can even just go straight into YouTube. They're all YouTube quality videos. They've been shot and edited really well, especially the deer one. We're kind of proud of that one as well. So where do we buy this stuff? I mean, you can buy anything and everything on Amazon now. So if you want to do that, you can go to Amazon, sporting goods stores, Bass Pro, Cabela's, Gander Mountains, Camping World. They have a lot of this stuff. Restaurant supply stores may not have one in your area. We got a couple here in Lexington. Those are good places to go. Online, if you don't want to go to Amazon, I'm not touting these folks. They have not paid me. I just have used these guys to buy equipment for myself. And for the lab, it's www.sausagemaker.com. It is a website designed for equipment to target folks like yourself, your do-it-yourself or your homesteaders. Not only you find meat processing equipment, you'll find canning, processing stuff, fruits and vegetable stuff, even if you want to make your own sauerkraut. Yeah, there's stuff on there as well. So that's sausagemaker.com. It's a good place to go. And with that, I can stop sharing my screen and take any questions if you've got that. I'm a big fan of Keanu Reeves. I don't want to be part of a world where kindness is considered to be a weakness. We're getting into the holidays. It's always a good idea to be kind to those people as well. So stop sharing there. Do we have any questions?
I got one question about the
Sure.
bacterial spray, the vinegar waters.
Yeah.
What's the ratio or mixture for that?
It's a 10% solution. So however many gallons you're going to use, just 10% of that should be vinegar. And if you go a little bit high, it's not that big of a deal.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
Great information.
Yeah.
Good question, Woody. Good question. Great information there. As always, you mentioned kindness. It's always good to share some of your harvest. If you're a deer hunter, it's always good to share some of your harvest with a neighbor. I often tell people if you're hunting on someone's property, maybe even share some of the harvest with them. So yeah,
absolutely. They'll share the harvest. They even have a program. You have to help me out because I got so many states in my head that do these. Is it share the harvest or feed the hungry or
the Hunters for the Hungry program?
Hunters for the Hungry. Yeah, I was getting there. I hear so many of them, and they're all cool names. I can never remember which one's Kentucky's and which one's Tennessee's and Illinois and so on and so forth.
And if something like, if you're interested in Hunters for the Hungry of donating a deer, which goes to a great cause, definitely they put those at a lot of food banks across the state.
Yes.
You can go to Fish and Wildlife's webpage, fw.ky.gov, and there are processors that are scattered across the state. Call one of those processors if you're interested in donating that. And definitely take care of that carcass before you donate it. Whether you're processing it yourself, you're taking it to somewhere to be processed, or if you're donating it to someone or to Hunters for the Hungry, definitely take care of those carcasses.
Yep.
Greg, great information. Really
Thank
good
you.
information. It's something that if you're a hunter out there, whether you're hunting deer, bear, whether you're processing your own pigs, something we all need to look at, because definitely in the end, it's still food. It's an edible product and it's still food.
Yep. Absolutely. Like I said, you go on CDC and there's a bunch of examples of people that have gotten sick from, not only, commercial food, but wildlife, home processed food, and so on and so forth.
Definitely. Yes, sir. Well, we appreciate you spending the last hour with us, hanging out with us, sharing this awesome information. And if you have any questions, give your county extension agent a call. And if we're unsure of the answer, we'll definitely get a hold of Gregg. And
yep. I'm always open.
And Gregg's great to help us out. And but thank you for tuning in tonight. Gregg, thanks again. And everybody have a wonderful evening.
Yep.
Thanks a lot.
Go Cats.
Bye-bye.
Bye.